Good evening, friends. I am Darren Bailey, and I am joined here tonight with my two good friends, Aaron Del Mar, my running mate for Lieutenant Governor, and my new friend, Jeannie Evans, who is running for U.S. Senate. We're here tonight for a fireside conversation. As you well know, that we had a little bit of a hiccup in our plans today. We anticipated on visiting many friends all across the state, but we woke up and unfortunately, as it is in Illinois and as it can be in March, we had snow and we had ice on the ground, and the plane was unable to come and pick us up. So we strategized and tried to come up with a different plan of seeking and dividing and conquering, but that didn't work. So we decided to come here at Springfield, and we've been enjoying the day here. You're getting a sneak preview of what things are going to look like tomorrow evening. We're excited. We're going to have a room full, and we're going to have fun. So, Aaron and I and Jeannie, we're looking forward to serving you because there's a lot of work to be done, especially here in Illinois and right here in Springfield. And you've heard our messaging all year long. And you've put your trust in us. You know that we're ground up people, and we've been there. When we knew that there was a problem, when we knew something needed to be done, we jumped in at the ground level, the grassroots level, and we got it done. I've run for state rep. I've served in the school board, run as a state senator. Aaron has did the same thing up in the Chicagoland area. And we know that we are your team for the entire state of Illinois. It's been a long time since we've had a team, a governor and a lieutenant governor to serve who truly represented the entire state. And that's what we're going to do. And that's why you're putting your faith in us. And we just humbly ask for your vote tomorrow. And we're going to have fun here tonight. So, tomorrow is also my birthday, and we're going to have fun celebrating that. I'm looking forward to having a victory and celebrating with everyone here. And we'll see you at 6 o'clock tomorrow evening. But until then, we're going to have a little bit of a conversation here. So, Aaron?
Well, thanks for having me, Darren. For everyone at home, I'm Aaron Del Mar. I'm Darren Bailey's running mate. And I'm absolutely shocked to be sitting here with you here today. If somebody would have told me 9 months ago that I would be running for lieutenant governor with Darren Bailey, I would have said, you're absolutely out of your mind. I mean, let's just be honest. You and I have been throwing rocks at each other for a couple years prior to this, right? He's a southeastern farmer. I'm from the city. He used to call me, a troublemaker from Chicago, and I'd call him a sharecropper from Southern Illinois. But, I got challenged. I got challenged to sit down with Darren and Cindy and to talk and see about what it would look like if we combined our teams together and the skills that we have to govern all of Illinois. And what was supposed to be a 45-minute conversation turned to about 4.5 hours. And Darren and I talked about our past. We talked about our challenges with each other. We talked about our faith. We talked about all the problems that we thought Illinois had. And as we started talking about those things, we realized there wasn't that much difference between us on policy. There wasn't that much different from what he was experiencing down in Clay County that we were experiencing in the city of Chicago and in Cook County. And, after that, I thought, man, this could be a dynamic team. So I'm honored to be here.
I think this is a lesson for the people of Illinois and probably the Republican Party, that when we let these little differences divide us, I think you and I can serve as an example of what we do going forward, how we're going to have to work together, learn from each other. I think that's a winning strategy for the state.
Well, kind of like Donald Trump and J.D. Vance and Donald Trump and Marco Rubio. My hands are a lot bigger than Darren's. I'm not going to try to, mess around with them. But it does give us a great opportunity to govern the whole state of Illinois. Not just Chicago, not just rural or southern Illinois, but the whole state. And everybody has a seat at the table. And traveling around with Darren and Cindy and the team for the last couple months along this journey, really a movement, has been some of the greatest memories of my life. And I'm honored to be here with you. And along the way, we picked up a hitchhiker. Ladies and gentlemen, we have Jeannie Evans. She's running for U.S. Senate. Jeannie, why don't you tell everybody at home what you're about, now that you've joined the kind of the movement along with us?
Sure. It's been a privilege to hit campaign stops across Southern Illinois with Darren Bailey and Aaron Del Mar. It's been an honor for them to invite me to join them and to have their support. I am Jeannie Evans. I'm running for United States Senate. In Illinois, we continue to have, under Democrat rule, we continue to have high prices and high crime. We need an outsider. We need a fresh voice who will innovate and make our communities safer and take the steps to bring down prices for American families. I'm that political outsider. I bring the skills and the experience to take on these challenges. I graduated from Harvard Law School, and I've spent my career as a lawyer taking on powerful corporations to level the playing field for small businesses and to bring down prices for American families. I do antitrust work. I sue companies for price fixing. When the largest companies in our country get together and agree to fix prices, I sue them to bring down prices, make the markets more competitive. I have been very successful. I've recovered billions of dollars for American families. I've been named one of the top antitrust enforcement lawyers in the country. And I want to take those skills to Washington. There's a lot we can do in the healthcare industry, the housing industry, and energy to break up anti-competitive practices, break up unfair monopolies, and bring down prices dramatically for the American people. So I'm looking forward to going to Washington and doing that. And along with that, I also really want to work with our president on peeling back the regulatory burden and the tax burden that's crushing small businesses. We want to make Illinois and the country friendlier to small businesses and large businesses so they can create jobs and opportunities for the people of our state and our country.
You know, a lot of people are asking us why we all kind of combine, because we would, effectively taking on the top three competitors in the general election come November if we have the success that we're hoping for tomorrow. And I think it really melds well, right? We have many different voices. I love your voice. That hello, friends. I love that every time I hear it. Used to annoy me, but now I love it. Right, as I've been on the team, and Darren always says I talk too fast. So thank you for joining us, Jeannie. There's people that have been.
Well, speaking of which, friends, as I do most of my lives, I ask you to hit that like button and share. Get this shared. Hit the share button, and let's make sure that people all across Illinois know what we're doing.
Well, we've gotten some questions that have been emailed to us from people all across the state. Some of them are federal, some of them are, for the state of Illinois. So we'll kind of just dive into them and just chat about them. So the first question we have is the topic's encouraging voters to participate. Rebecca sent this one. She's from Central Illinois. Her question is, what would you say to someone who's thinking about sitting this primary out and not voting? And why is it important they show up? We'll start with Jeannie.
In this primary, voters do have a real choice. So for example, in my race, the race for United States Senate, in the Republican primary, we have 6 candidates. One of those candidates is really the establishment candidate. That's not me. I am the political outsider. I have the support of the grassroots. I am honored to have the support of Darren Bailey and Aaron Del Mar. As I said, I spent my career as a lawyer fighting for Americans. I've sued Chinese companies for violating our data privacy laws, stealing private data, and surveillance of Americans. I am so ready to fight. I have been fighting for Americans. I have been winning. We have an establishment candidate and we have the Republican Party, but they haven't been winning statewide offices in Illinois. It's time for a fresh voice. It's time for a candidate who has been winning to come in and flip this U.S. Senate seat red.
Darren, everybody, since I've been on the campaign trail going to Southern Illinois, people keep saying their vote doesn't count. You're one of the biggest leaders in Southern Illinois. I mean, what would you say to everybody?
Well, first of all, I want you to reflect back and think about a grandfather, a father, a brother, a sister, aunt, or an uncle who served in our military, and just kind of think about that at some point in time, what it means to serve in our armed forces. And when people sign up to serve, ultimately they're serving to protect our freedoms, and they're doing that so that we can live in peace, run for office, enjoy life here in this great nation. But when we then set back and refuse or fail to take the importance of voting, we're snubbing our noses at them. And this duty, it's not just a right, it is a duty to vote. And that's how we, the people, uphold this free process, this constitutional republic. That's what it's all about. So please get registered to vote. Vote. Let your voice be known, because you're right. Republicans, sometimes we're the party of working people. We're the party of common sense. And I know when we get frustrated about something, it's easier just to say, to push it aside and go on with life. And too many people, especially our younger generation, they've done this with voting. My vote doesn't count. It's rigged. It's just on. And they simply walk away from it. You're walking away from something thinking you're rebelling by not voting, when in fact, we're costing ourselves our freedoms as we begin to lose them, because everyone is frustrated almost about every aspect of life today. And with real and true conservative, genuine leadership, it can change. So please put it to the test. Put it to the test tomorrow, March 17. Put it to the test this coming November 3rd, when we really, truly have the opportunity to take our state back. And you'll see that I think we'll make you proud again to be an American, and proud again to cast your vote.
One of the things that I was looking at when I was preparing some of the things that our visions and our policies, I was looking at other states. Illinois has a lot of challenges, but there's other states that have very similar challenges. And the one is getting our rural voters out, getting our southern voters out. And if you look at Texas, right? Texas, everyone says, oh, it's a red state. But they have Houston, they have Austin, they have El Paso, they have Sacramento, El Paso. And you know what the rural farmers and ranchers do? They come out and they vote 70, 80% so they can fight against those big cities. And it's a very similar problem that we have in Chicago. And what people say, well, Aaron, that's too easy. Texas, it's always been a red state. But look at Florida, right? Florida has Miami. It has Tallahassee. It has Orlando. But what do those citrus farmers do? What do those other rural areas do? They come out and vote, and they know that they need to dilute those big cities. That's something that we should be pushing here. That's something that should be happening in Illinois, because in Illinois, 97 of the 102 counties, ruby red. But they don't vote very much. But if we get out our rural voters, our Southern Illinois voters, we can do a great job of cutting into the cities like Chicago, parts of the Metro East, get our votes out, and return a Republican victory.
That's right. A lot of people don't realize that only 70% of eligible voters in Illinois are registered to vote. So a lot of times these past several election cycles, when we had school board elections, when we hear that 12 to 16% turnout, what that really means it means that 5 to 6% of eligible voters are showing up. When we have a 40% turnout, that means that about 30% of the true eligible voters are turning out. So guys, we can do better. We must. And after this election cycle, after tomorrow, call your friends, call your neighbors, make sure they show up to the polls. And then between now and November 3rd, start having this conversation with your friends at church and at work and around the dinner table. Ask them if they are registered. No, I'm not getting involved in that, they might say, and help them get registered. And then make sure, again, to stay with them, to help them to show up and understand the voting process, because it is an honorable process and one that truly does protect our freedoms if we get ourselves educated and if we seek out the proper candidates to support.
Yeah, and I'll just say one more thing on that, is that some people think the primary doesn't matter, just the general. And we sometimes only get like in the low 20% of people who come out in the primary to vote. But that candidate you pick in the primary is the one that's in the general. And if you don't pick one that can win the general, you can't win the general election. So I believe I am a candidate who can win the general election. I will be working hard. I've got donors lining up behind me, and I bring those conservative Republican values, and I can bring them to Washington if I get your support in the primary. So please get out there. It's going to be really cold tomorrow, but please get out of your warm house and get to the polls. And I'd ask you to think about Jeannie Evans for U.S. Senate.
This question is going to be for Darren. So this is from Sandy, who's also from Central Illinois. She wants to know, what are the 3 main issues that you're going to be talking about in the general election against J.B. Pritzker if we have the success tomorrow?
That's one of the first things that we did as we began to set and consider and pray about, running for governor, who our running mate was going to be, which we knew that was going to be key. And we know the team with you and I representing the entire state is amazing. So then what? How do we reach and appeal the people of Illinois and convince them that, J.B. Pritzker is truly destroying our state, and yet how do we fix that? And so we sat down and we began to explore and understand that we have to pick some issues that the majority of Illinoisans have in common. And the beautiful thing about this is J.B. Pritzker has laid this at our feet in the last 7 years. Friends, it's affordability. People can't afford to live in the state of Illinois. Everyone knows someone who has left, and they have all left the state because they can't afford to live here. Our property taxes are too high. Our utility prices are too high. And you know what? These two particular issues right now, the General Assembly could be meeting right now today. They should have been meeting a year ago talking about this and trying to deal with these, tampering these down. But instead, Pritzker, he just desires to ignore this and make life more burdensome for us. The gas tax issue it can be addressed, but we the people are simply being ignored. It's safety. The Safety Act must be repealed, and that can be dealt with even from the governor's office until we get it fully repealed. People don't realize that in the city of Chicago there is a vacancy of 1,600 police officers, and just walk down Michigan Avenue and take a look at the storefront, and you're going to see about a 30% vacancy rate from 4 and 8 years ago. Businesses, Walmarts have packed up and moved out because someone can walk right into their store and carry out goods without paying for them. And the Safety Act restricts anything. The police officers, because they're overworked, they're essentially unable to do anything. And then ultimately education. By our state's own standards, our educational process is failing our children. So we've got to go in and rebuild the education system from the ground up, and we can do that. The governor has the ability to appoint many positions to our agencies, and that's what it's all about. People. It's all about you. You know that as we've worked with you these last several years and connected with you, we've heard your stories. You've helped us, and it's all about people. So we put the right people in place to help begin to steer this ship around. We get government out of public school. We get all together. We just get it out. There's too many mandates. That's why your property taxes continue to expand. We create school choice, and we let local school boards, local communities decide how they want to educate their children. So affordability, safety, education. Anyone, you think about that and you'll know we've got a lot of work to do with the Democrats and everyone here. Everyone's got that in common. And when we win in November, it's going to send those shockwaves across this state. And too many politicians are too concerned about re-election. So I believe everyone is going to be forced to the table, and we're going to be able to get some things done very, very soon on these issues.
That brings up a great point. Most people forget that we have 3 equal branches of government, just like we do in Washington and we do have here in Illinois. And the executive branch here in Illinois is incredibly strong. If you're elected governor, you'll have over 2,200 positions that you can appoint. You'll have 327 boards, including, the University of Illinois trustees, Northern, Eastern, Southern, Western Illinois trustees, the Illinois Department of Insurance, the Illinois Department of Children and Family Services, the Illinois State Police. It's an incredibly powerful level of government that we can do to make an immediate change and start putting Illinois back on the map and turning this sinking ship around and getting us all afloat. All right, Jeannie, so we're going to ask a question for you. If you're elected to the United States Senate, what kinds of things would you be doing to making lives in Illinois better?
Yeah, a lot of it is actually very consistent with what you just talked about, Darren. So Darren talked about affordability and reducing prices. A lot of the high prices we see are a result of the government regulations. So we have this problem in Illinois, but we also have it at the federal level. So under the Biden administration, they added thousands of new regulations on businesses. Complying with those costs money. So it increases the cost of businesses to have to comply with those, which they have to then pass along those costs to the consumers who have to pay more for goods. An example would be a new regulation under the Biden administration required a certain kind of refrigeration for grocery stores. For grocery stores to comply with that, it has raised the price of groceries by about 1% on average. So you multiply 1% by thousands of regulations, and those costs, that's what's making life unaffordable. I've talked to real estate developers who have told me about 35-40% of the cost of building homes and buildings is just complying with all these regulations. So one of the things I want to do in Congress is roll back those regulations. I know the Trump administration wants to do this as well. They have a leader of small business, like an advocate for small businesses that's trying to do this. I'll be working with them to just peel back those regulations one by one, so that businesses are not crushed by them, so they can succeed, they can do well and create jobs, but also their costs will be lower, and they can then charge lower prices to American families.
Wonderful. All right, the next question is going to be from Robert. He's in Berwyn. He's a retired private sector union tradesman. Darren, we're going to go for you. Robert said he's hearing concerns from public employees, and he asks, there's been some talk from union leaders saying that if you become governor, pensions that workers have already earned could be taken away. Could you address that concern?
Absolutely not. You have my word. I've been talking about this for years, and it seems like every time that we break some ground, and I convince people that we're not taking their retirement. You've earned that. That's your pension. That's your retirement. So there's J.B. Pritzker's using some information falsely and trying to make people believe that we're coming after their pensions. So listen, we're proud of our state, our government, our public sector union workers. We must have you. I recognize that, and I know that. So you have my word that no way, shape, or form will I let anyone touch, diminish, change your pensions, your retirement, what you're living off of. Not going to happen.
See, I think that's important to know, because there's a lot of ruby red Republicans out there that are pipe fitters, sheet metal workers, policemen, firemen, electricians, carpenters. These are all our people. These are the working man's people, and they need to know where Darren Bailey and I stand on this. You know, whichever governor it was before that made the deal and made that contract for your pension, if elected, we're going to inherit that. And we want to make sure you know that your pension is secure. What you've been saving for, what you've been depending on, is going to be there when it's your time to retire. And I think that's a very strong commitment. Yeah. Yep. So the next question we're going to this comes from Brecken. He wants to talk about supporting first responders. Brecken is a student and an Explorer firefighter at the Buckhart Fire Department. He asks, will your administration work closely with first responders, especially volunteer firefighters, who are so important to our smaller communities?
Absolutely. So that's the beauty of having a governor who came from small town America. My first year in 2019, when J.B. Pritzker first gave everyone the impression that he was interested in cutting the budget, which he ended up increasing it. But we started talking about having some cuts. So we had working groups, and I began to set in a particular working group because I was in one of the healthcare boards, and one of the Chicago representatives stood up and he pointed out an ambulance service in Illinois that hadn't made very many calls in the year, and it turned out to be that particular ambulance service was in my district, and it was interesting because when I stood up and I pointed to the map and I showed them, that if this ambulance service is taken out of service, then unfortunately it's going to be probably an hour and a half before anyone in that particular area receives adequate health care. I also wrote legislation giving 911 dispatchers, the proper emergency personnel certification and recognition. So guys, I know you're on the front line, and rural Illinois depends on emergency services, and you'll have a seat at the table, guaranteed.
Very good. We're going to start going a little bit into education. And Jeannie, we'll let you start off with this one. The first question was sent to us by Michael. He's a former teacher, assistant principal, and now school principal. Michael says he spent over 2 decades in Illinois schools and believes the system is failing students. He asks, what changes did you make to improve education outcomes and get Illinois and federal schools back on track?
Yeah, and I feel strongly about education. Some people think of it as a state issue, and mostly it is. But I think as an elected representative from Illinois, I can have some influence, and there often are federal funds available. I feel strongly that we do need to modernize our education system. have in this age of AI, we know that a lot of jobs are going to be replaced by technology. They're going to be automated, and we can be training workers to adapt to new jobs. We can have retraining, reskilling programs. Those might be for older workers. In the schools, I think we can allow a lot more choice. So I'm in favor of school choice, parental rights over helping choose the kind of education for their kids. But I think we can also, in the public schools, allow more choice of learning trades. We used to do this in our schools, and right now,
in civics.
Yeah, we hear, I was reading the Wall Street Journal, the CEO of Ford saying he's got 5,000 mechanic jobs that he can't fill. And those are good jobs. Those are paying over $100,000 a year. And we could start training our kids to be able to learn the skills to be a mechanic or an electrician or a plumber or an HVAC technician. So I think we can offer more options. There's a lot of kids who don't want to go to college, or they go to college, graduate, and can't find a job. And but there are jobs available that we're not ready to fill. So I think we can modernize our education system to give people a lot more options in the kind of education or skilled trades that they're going to prepare for.
One of the things that angers me, and I'm an emotional guy, right? I like to speak up, is that we had a great program here in Illinois. It was Empower Illinois. It was a program that was here for 5 years and was offering school vouchers, offering additional funds to kids that were, I think it was 150 or below the poverty line, that could use these resources to have an opportunity to go to a better education source. And, J.B. Pritzker and the Chicago Democrats let it expire. But in the big, beautiful bill, there is a new act called the Invest in Kids Act. And that would offer resources for homeschoolers who have been just misrepresented and had their resources depleted. It would give opportunities for those that are in public schools that like their public schools. They get additional tutoring. It offers opportunity for some levels of school choice. And in the United States, 30 states have already opted in, including 2 blue states, including Colorado and North Carolina. But Illinois hasn't. Right. And I think that goes to show you that here in Illinois, J.B. Pritzker hates Donald Trump more than he loves Illinois. And I think that's a problem for us. And I think that, when our governor refuses to create and utilize federally approved programs that bring resources into our state, I think that speaks volumes, to what they really believe in.
So it was in 2022, my last year serving in the Senate, and that was the first year that this program needed to be renewed from the governor. And that's probably one of the most heartbreaking things that I witnessed, because every day for months, parents and children would line the halls of both the House and the Senate, and just completely were ignored by our governor. And something that wouldn't have cost the state, it simply gives a tax savings to someone who's making the donation, and people want to support this program. But the governor, J.B. Pritzker, refused to let that happen. And so therefore, many children were kind of lost and moved around the system. And it's just, it is shameful that Illinois does not have the state program nor working with the federal level.
So it's safe to say, everyone at home, the day that Darren Bailey gets elected governor, you're going to be opting us in, because that's really all it takes, is to opt in.
Yeah.
He just sends one letter to the White House,
Yes.
and we opt in, and these resources, which aren't taxpayer funded,
Right.
will flow to all of our kids here in Illinois
Right.
that need it the most.
They will flow to them, and the state program must be revitalized to allow people to make donations and basically give these children a hope at a better education.
Well, very good. All right, the next question was submitted by Gretchen. She's a psychiatric nurse practitioner. Gretchen says she has seen firsthand how broken the mental health system can be in Illinois. She asks, what concrete steps would you take as governor to improve mental health care and oversight in our state facilities?
So that's another thing that I have witnessed during the 4 years that I served in Springfield. Every time there was an issue or a problem, J.B. Pritzker would just continue to throw hundreds of millions of dollars at mental health. And maybe you remember when marijuana was legalized, that the proceeds of that were to go to mental health, and we're not going to have any more issues of such. And unfortunately today, when someone has an issue and they need help, most people have no idea where to go. So this is a true problem in society today that must be addressed. And, the Illinois Department of Public Health, again, this is all about people who are manning these stations. And I believe that J.B. Pritzker has, handpicked people purposely for these positions and basically told them to stand down and let him handle the situation. We need to find good people out there. One person, two people, three people. We can't do it all. This is about people. So this is about finding the right people to head up these agencies, putting them to work, giving them the freedom to get something done, and truly addressing the issues, which has not been done for decades in Illinois.
Definitely. All right, we're going to go on to another question here. All right, this one comes from Anthony, and he asks, how would your administration make sure regions like the Metro East receive fair attention and investment when it comes to infrastructure, economic growth, and statewide planning?
Well, again, there's a lot of areas that are simply being ignored out there. And again, we sit at the table and we have these conversations. I believe we are going to find so much waste in our budget that we're going to be able to use that to get a lot done. We're not going to have any tax increases. We're going to fix the problems that exist here in Illinois, and especially in the Metro East, where there's been a lot of neglect over there with our children. And I think at the end of the day, we'll come together and we'll have some wonderful ideas, and we'll get things turned around.
Next question for you, Jeannie. If you're elected to the United States Senate, right? Of course, Chicago is the major metropolitan area, and a tourism driver and a driver for commerce, Illinois Board of Trade and such. But outside of Illinois, outside of you get out of the collar counties, is a ton of farmland, a lot of agriculture, a lot of manufacturing. What kind of things would you do as U.S. Senator to help our farmers, to help our agriculture in those areas?
Yeah, it's been great to be out on this campaign and be all over Illinois and talking to farmers. I was just at a Farm Bureau breakfast a couple days ago, and to be in Southern Illinois and other parts, Western, Central Illinois, and hear from farmers about what issues are important to them. And I've heard about a lot of issues. I've heard about farmers who are squeezed, having a hard time if they're growing corn or soybeans, and the cost of production is greater than what their expected price of selling them are going to be. And part of that is, I think, anti-competitive practices by the middlemen. So there's certain big companies that are the middlemen in the farming industry that are really squeezing them. So I do want to look at what's going on, what's anti-competitive, how can we break that up so that farmers can make a living and can make a profit on what they're doing, because they're the real workers. They're the ones taking on the risk. They're doing the work, they're taking out the loans, they're paying for the insurance. So I really want to look at that. I've heard from farmers who are concerned that Chinese companies are buying up land. So I'm a lawyer who's sued Chinese companies. I understand the threat from China, not just in terms of the economy, but also militarily and national security. And I know what they're doing in terms of taking our data. And so I am concerned about them buying up farmland for national security reasons. I also have talked to farmers who said Chinese companies buy certain businesses just to get the IP, just to get the intellectual property and the trade secrets, take it with them back to China, and then they might just sell the company afterward. So I do think we have to be careful about maintaining our technology. I'm someone who would support not selling our fastest, most powerful chips to China. They are, an adversary on the world stage that we have to take seriously. So, it's kind of interrelated, but I learn a lot speaking with farmers. I want to support them. We need to be able to support the agricultural industry. It's very important just as a lifestyle and to provide food, but also for national security reasons.
And you'll always have a farmer to fall back on for information. So.
Right.
And as a follow-up to that, I know that you live in the Chicagoland area and you're probably a fan of deep dish, but you did have a chance to try Casey's Pizza. Are you still a Casey's fan, or are you, a deep dish fan, or does Casey's won you over? Because it's amazing.
Casey's was delicious, but I am a deep dish fan.
All right,
Chicago deep dish pizza.
I want to jump in real quick and remind you, like this page or what you're seeing, share it, push it out there. And if you haven't already done so, go to BaileyDelmarHQ.com and register for the election party that's going to be taking place right here tomorrow night at this time as we begin to celebrate a new era for Illinois.
Well, so Darren, I'm going to go to you. In the past, you said some unkind things about my hometown, right? And I told you that when we were running, that if you ever said Chicago was a hellhole again, I'm going to kick you right in the shin, right? That's just the beginning of where that fight might start. But you've been spending more time up here. You've been traveling with me. We finally got you a Chicago hot dog. You tried out some Garrett's popcorn, right? The two main staples of Chicago. I mean, most Chicagoans can live off of that. What have you learned about our great city of Chicago?
Well, I've always loved Chicago. I always have. And I've loved it so much that when I saw the problems, it hurt me. And I asked myself, why don't people see it? Why isn't change taking place? Because it just seems like the same thing continually gets done. So yeah, I said some things that me personally thought would be attention getters and people would connect with. But no, the people of Chicago love their city, and they don't. Those words that stung and they hurt. And I completely get that, and I understand that. So many times across the Chicago press, I've taken those words back, and I understand. Much like probably talking to my wife, if her outfit didn't look right, or if I thought something was wrong, I probably wouldn't tell her that. I'd probably figure another avenue around that. So that's the way it is with Chicago. I want to be a part of making Cook County, making Chicago the greatest city in the state, because I am proud. We need Chicago. We need Chicago functioning properly to help Illinois function properly. And so thank you for bringing that up. So Chicago, I am sorry that I insulted you. I'll never forget the night that I said that on stage in a debate. And I really was. I was so frustrated with J.B. Pritzker. And when I said that, I looked up and I saw the horror from one of the people conducting the interviews. And I wondered then that, what's that all about? Well, I found out immediately when the Tribune and the papers published it. Chicagoans weren't happy. So lesson learned.
Well, so, we have three diverse people. And so we'll do a quick one. Favorite national baseball team?
White Sox.
I'm sorry.
White Sox.
The who? That is a team in Chicago. All right, Darren.
I'm on the south side. I live on the south side.
I've never been to a Cubs game, so I'm going to.
Oh.
I need to go to a Cubs game, but I have become all things Illinois. Period. So I've been to a lot of St. Louis Cardinals. I love baseball. Loved it when I was young, collecting baseball cards. I have quite an extensive ball card collection as well. So let's get to a Chicago Cubs ball game this
Well,
summer.
I can make that happen.
I figured you could.
Growing up in the city of Chicago, I literally lived on Waveland, 5121 West Waveland. So for my Cubby fans that are watching this at home, throwing a shout out to you. I'm going to bring Darren Bailey, the farmer and the Dell, are going to come to a Chicago game at Wrigley Field, the friendly confines. Jeannie, you can wear your Sox hat. You can join us. Maybe we'll do it when the Sox play the Cubs, and we can have some fun there. Electability is probably one of the biggest arguments every candidate, both in your race and our race, have been saying. Jeannie, what would you say to those at home that say, Jeannie, what makes you more electable than any of your competitors?
And I think I want to speak to the general election, or are you talking about the primary election?
General election. Yeah,
in the general election. So on the Democrat side, the candidates that are running very far to the left. It's a lot about taxing and spending, raising taxes, taking more money from the people of Illinois, and then the government choosing how they want to spend it and the various programs they want to spend it on. I believe in reducing the size of government, lowering our taxes, leaving more money in the pockets of the people of Illinois, and let them decide how to spend it. So I think in the general election, when the voters across the state, in the Republican Party and the Democrat and the independent voters, when they think about what we're going to bring is reducing taxes, reducing prices, lowering the levels of crime, and strengthening the economy, creating jobs and opportunities. I think that's what everybody wants. So I really think that is the message that's going to resonate. We haven't had a Republican in statewide office very recently, but we do have, I think the state shares the conservative Republican values of the Republican Party, and we just need to get that message out. And I think there's going to be a stark contrast between the Democrats who are tending toward socialistic policies. I mean, we have Democrat socialists, and we have a lot of spending programs, and we're going to have a much more fiscally responsible message from the Republicans about how we are going to help American families afford the cost of living, lower the regulatory and tax burden and make their communities more safe.
Darren, this has been one of the biggest things that people have been throwing at us since we've been out there, right? Especially from our co-competitors. And, those at home, we don't call them our opponents. We call them our co-competitors, because no matter what happens tomorrow night, when they call this election, we need everybody on board. And before you give your answer, I want everybody to know where Darren and I are. If Darren and I are successful tomorrow, which, I believe we are, I feel like we've done the hard work. We're ready to lead this team. But if for some reason we're not, we're going to endorse whoever the candidate is. We're going to make a donation, and we are going to support them in every way that we can, regardless if it's us or regardless of whoever's there. And I think that's something important, those at home. And I encourage our co-competitors to join us in that same pledge to supporting the Republican ticket, because I know there's going to be some hard feelings. But, to electability, people, some of our co-competitors have been criticizing it because you didn't get the result you wanted in 2022.
Oh gosh, it's been a crazy last 3 weeks, especially, and it's been a super crazy 24 hours. And you're exactly right. When we hear really, I thrive on criticism like that. It's crazy. I don't like it. But when you say that we can't win because I lost 4 years ago, guys, did that disqualify Abraham Lincoln? Did that disqualify Ronald Reagan? Did that disqualify the Chicago Bears from getting as far as? You learn from your mistakes and you learn from your losses. We have the plan. We've got it. We have the experience between the both of us of knowing how government works, of knowing how we're going to go about fixing this problem. So no, I'm not buying any of this nonsense that we can't win, because I'm telling you what, if you can't win a primary, what business? If you can't get your grassroots base built up enough to take a primary, what business do you think that you have winning a general? Absolutely none. And 4 years ago, it was a low voter turnout, period. People just didn't show up to the polls. And I think we're different. Both of us are. Illinois is different. Chicago is different. And I think Chicago is ready, because J.B. Pritzker's ruthless, destructive mandates have destroyed life. They've pushed business out. They're refusing to allow business to come in, and we're going to fix that. And I think that between now and November, we're going to see the turnout that's going to literally shock the nation. And when we beat J.B. Pritzker.
One of the things that frustrated me when I hear these arguments, when we're at Lincoln Day dinners or we're at speaking events, they've not provided any data. Nobody's done any polling to show that this candidate can beat J.B. Pritzker, this candidate does better than J.B. Pritzker. If you can't win the primary, to your point, how have you earned your way into the general election?
And we all know what the problems are. We know what the solutions are. But let's, you and I are proven people. We've started from the bottom up. You see our track record. You see that we haven't wavered. We've stood firm. Aaron tried working for years with the Cook County GOP and in Palatine Township, and take a look at Palatine Township, because there's a success story there amongst all the townships and the wards in Chicago. And you all know where I've come from, standing up for you against all adversity, standing up, sometimes being a lone no vote just in the House or the Senate, just because it was a ridiculous bill, and trying to call state government into working on what was important, into making things more affordable and safer for you. So I think at the end of the day, that's what people are going to respect. And do we want to elect someone that that has no track record? Zero track record, because we know what happens when we elect billionaires, and we know what happens sometimes when we elect people without any track records. They show up and they don't get the job done. And that's not going to happen with us.
One of the things you talked about is having a track record and being able to govern and be able to lead. And I think one of the cool things that we put out there, we put out our public policy statements. For those at home that want to know what our plan is, what Darren Bailey and Aaron Delmar are going to do, you can go to blueprintforillinois.com. Again, that's blueprintforillinois.com. Hate giving people homework, right? Send them to a website or whatnot. But I think that really lists out the real plan that we have. And one of the cool things that we have on there at the bottom is a tracker. And that's our tracker there that shows all of our different budget and line items with appropriations. So for the first time, we're not even through a primary yet, and we're showing people where their money's being spent. Because when we talk about those 327 boards and commissions that the governor of Illinois appoints, Not one of them is about accountability. Not one of them is about transparency. They're all about these other fringe commissions that are spending our taxpayer dollars. We're not seeing a revolt. It's not helping anybody's life get better. And, we're coming out with a new program. I know a lot of people don't love the name Doge. Republicans, we love it, but some independents and Democrats don't.
That means a little different on the state level.
It does a little
federally.
different. We're not going in there with a chainsaw. Elon Musk is not coming to Illinois, but we are going to go in there with a scalpel.
Right.
And, what are we going to be doing there?
Well, we're going to be finding the waste, fraud, and abuse that we all know is in the budget. I mean, friends, $2.5 billion with a capital B dollars J.B. Pritzker spent last year giving people who are here illegally free food, free housing, free insurance. That's a tip of the iceberg. We already talked about the recreational marijuana saving mental health, which isn't happening. Remember years ago, whenever gambling, online gambling was legalized here in Illinois. That was the end all for our problems with education. Does anybody even remotely remember how long ago that was? Because things have done nothing but go downhill since then. And the doubling your gas tax was going to fix all of our roads. And somehow or another, that money has been dispersed to the four winds very recently. Half of the money that should be going to downstate projects was sent to bail out Chicago CTA without any accountability, without any solutions to fixing the problems, to helping them become profitable. So that's what we're going to do. When I got frustrated in 2017 and began to realize that something's wrong, the Illinois budget was $32 billion. And today it's at $55 billion. And guess what? You're all going to be happy about this because several weeks ago when J.B. Pritzker gave his State of the State address, he's only raising the budget 0.5%. And you can feel good in that because what you probably don't realize is that 0.5% is $1.5 billion of new spending. As many people have said before, as I've said all the way back in 2017, Illinois doesn't have a revenue problem. We have a spending problem. And it is high time that we get to work attracting business back here, attracting factories. Illinois' corporate taxes is twice as what it is in our neighboring states. So why would business want to come here? That is the answer to our solutions. We bring business all over the state. We stood down in Edwards County and Champion Labs that shut down a few weeks ago, 1,000 people out of a job. That is the Illinois story. That must end. And friends, it will end in January of 2027 as we begin to truly go to work for you.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about, we talked the marijuana tax earlier about, it's going to solve all of our mental health problems, right? Marijuana was going to save Illinois' mental health problems, and we haven't seen it. We talked about the gas tax that's going to do all of our roads, that are going to fix everything we're never going to have to raise taxes to redo our roads, our bridges, our waterways, none of that. We're going to bring slot machines in, and they're going to pay for education, right? Well, wait a minute. If the slot machines are paying for education, and 65 to 70% of our property tax bill goes to education, how come our property taxes have been rising and rising and rising?
Because nobody knows where that money's coming from or where it's going. And we're going to take that 5,000-page document, we're going to dissect it, we're going to present it and make it look like a real budget does, that you're going to see the numbers. And many politicians and the Auditor General, Frank Montino, told us in 2022 that that can't be done. It cannot be done. So, what we do, I got to say one more thing. With our co-competitors, they're good people and they've done amazing things. And there's a lot of amazing information out there. And some people want to say, well, I've been studying and putting together information for the last 10 and 20 years. My question is, what have you done with it? I've taken that information since I started running in 2017 and shared that with the people. Their information is relevant today because I've helped make it relevant. Again, another reason why you need to elect us as your governor. And
we need a lot more astronauts and less astronomers, probably. Going to background, right, and being grassroots. You've been a Christian and a conservative your whole life. Yeah. But you went to one of the most prestigious universities in the United States, right? Well, it used to be a little bit better probably when you were there. It's been under a lot of fire now. But what was it like going to Harvard and having to hold strong for that conservative values and the conservative movement in one of the most liberal schools out there?
That's a good question. I'm going to take one step back and kind of tell you how I got to Harvard Law School. So I was blessed with wonderful parents. My father taught me to love the gospel. He raised me in a Christian home, but also to love the Constitution. He read to me from the Federalist Papers as bedtime stories. He read to me from the Constitution. And when I was young, he encouraged me to go to law school and become a constitutional lawyer. He believed so strongly in the Constitution and the freedoms and the liberties that we have in America. He wanted me to be prepared to defend those. And he encouraged me to prepare to do that. And I did. I worked hard in school. I made my way to Harvard Law School. And I did end up being one of the very few conservative students at Harvard Law School. I was there from 94 to 97, overlapped with Senator Ted Cruz, who's also a conservative. And so we were both among the few conservative students at Harvard Law School. We were part of the Federalist Society. And in my classes at Harvard Law School, often these classes would be like 150 students. And I can remember, for example, in criminal law, a lot of the students were very liberal and espousing very liberal viewpoints. And the professor I had at the time was Alan Dershowitz. And he would often say, okay, Miss Evans, please give us the conservative side to that. Please give us the other side. I had the same thing happen in my torts class with Morton Horowitz. When the students would be giving very liberal answers, he would say, Miss Evans, please let us hear the conservative side to that story. And I was kind of known as the conservative at Harvard Law School.
Well, I mean, with that background, I mean, even starting in college and before that, you know, as a small child, when your co-competitors call you a Democrat, I mean, how does that make you feel?
Yeah, it's just so ironic. So in this campaign, I've never been accused of being a Democrat until I ran for U.S. Senate as a Republican. And one of the competitors in the race, I think, in a desperate attempt, because I'm leading, I think, he has accused me of being a Democrat, and which is just so crazy because everyone who knows me, anyone who knew me in high school, in college, in law school, as a lawyer, I'm one of the only conservative Republicans at my law firm. Everybody knows I'm usually the only conservative in the room. I live on the south side of Chicago where most people are Democrat. And, you know, I go vote in the primary and I pull that Republican ballot, and I'm, you know, the first one that day that's pulled the Republican ballot. So, yeah, it's just wrong. So I have a competitor who's accused me of being a Democrat. It's false. If you've heard that, one of the things he said is that I voted in a Democrat primary once in 2020. I just want people to know I live in the Chicago where everybody's Democrat, and usually in the primary, there's almost no one running as a Republican.
And that needs to be fixed.
Yeah,
So, yeah,
right.
and your competitor had the opportunity to fix that, and that did not get fixed.
Yeah. So when there's no Republican running, and maybe on the Democrat side, there's a far left Democrat running against a more moderate or center or right Democrat, sometimes a Republican like me will pull that Democrat ballot to try to pick the candidate who we think is the best, which is the further right of the Democrats. It's, you know, we'd prefer to have a more conservative Republican, but if the choice is between a socialist Democrat and a more center-right Democrat, you'd choose that rather than pulling that Republican ballot when nobody's even on the ballot. So that's that. But yeah, I'm rooted in loving the Constitution, loving our country, wanting to defend the freedoms that we have, freedom of speech, freedom of religion. I want to go to Washington and be a voice to protect the Constitution, to protect our democracy. And our country is, I think, leaning too far towards socialism. I want to pull us back to, along with freedom of speech, but also free markets, free enterprise.
You know, and that's funny because, you know, in the last week and a half, 2 weeks, you know, the attacks on all of us have just been ramping up. And I mean, I open up my social media and I spend 10 minutes while I'm having my breakfast reading it. And after I'm done my breakfast, I don't even like me. You know, I mean, it's a rough road. And I think that's disappointing that we have fellow Republicans that are you know, choose to attack each other in these manners. I mean, recently somebody called our supporters, you know, hillbillies and uneducated. And, you know, it breaks my heart when people talk about our people that way, you know. And when I say our people, Darren, I mean our people. They may not have started as our people, but I look at them as our people now. And
if you can't run on your record and all you've got to do is look at the fault and try to tear somebody else down, you have no business whatsoever running, period, because that is what is destroying the moral fabric of society. It's destroying the moral fabric of government, and all you're doing is turning people off to truly get a conservative elected this fall.
Right. Well, you know, we got about 7 more minutes to go. I want to open the floor, Jeannie, for all those voters at home. This is an opportunity for you to make your closing remark before elections start tomorrow. What would you say to the people at home and why they should vote for you?
I would say I'm the conservative Republican in this race. I'm the person who cares so much about defending our democracy, our constitutional system, our separation of powers, our individual liberties. I will be such a strong voice and advocate for that. And I also have the background as a winning attorney. So one of my competitors who was in the state party, and the state party didn't win any statewide offices for Republicans. It is time for us to win. I have been winning at court. I have gotten great results for the people that I represent. As I said, I've recovered billions of dollars for Americans. And I want to bring that fight and those skills and tools to Washington to win for Illinois and for the United States. I want to roll back the regulatory and tax burden so businesses can succeed. I want to reduce crime to make our communities safe. I want to reduce taxes, and I want to make our markets competitive, which will bring down prices for everybody.
Great. And from my side of this, it has really, truly been an honor to run with Darren and to be, I would say the word I would use is embraced by, the rural parts of the state, where I haven't spent as much time in my life, being from the city of Chicago. What I would say to those that are home is, and especially the ones that I've met on the tour stops that we've been going out, thank you. Thank you for all your kindness. Thank you for coming to our events. Thank you for coming to our meet and greets, for putting lawn signs out in the yards for us. To all of our volunteers, to all of our coordinators, to all the people that are fighting for us on social media and defending Darren and I, we've seen your hard work. We've seen your time, and I appreciate that. In 47 years of being in this world, the only person that ever prayed for me was my grandmother. And Darren and I were in Macon County, and some lovely ladies came up to me, and I just thought they wanted a picture. We have the backdrop up. That's kind of what you do at some of these meet and greets. And they came up to me and they said, Aaron, every Wednesday we get on a Zoom call. There's about 40, 45 of us, and we pray for you. And not only did they pray for me, but they prayed for my children. That can't help but lift you up. It's kind of opened my eyes to a lot more parts of our state. And for those ladies out there that are praying for me, and for everyone out there, thank you so much for educating me and for teaching me and for everything that you've done. And I really appreciate it. And so, Darren, as we're closing out, you're the boss.
Friends, thank you for tuning in. And again, like and share this moment, the fireside chat, minus the fire in the background, but the fire Pritzker that's coming. So we've got it. But no, listen, here's the deal. Aaron's right. He was very forgiving of me because I stood in his way a lot because I thought he was a simple Chicago rhino. And then when people challenged me to visit with him and we had that 4-hour meeting, I found out that, wow, none of the stuff that I had heard was true. And shame on the people who tried to convince me, and shame on me for buying it. So it will be on Wednesday, March 18th. I'm going to set aside all of this crude, ridiculous thing that's the stuff that's been said about us, and we're going to work together and to create and bring about a new day in Illinois. We want to create a Republican Party that's been void of leadership. You're going to have your leadership, but we are going to work together. No more nastiness, no more side gigs. One party, one mission, one goal: fire J.B. Pritzker and restore the greatness of Illinois.
Well, thank you, everybody at home. We look forward to seeing you out there. And the last thing is get out there and vote. That's right. You have an opportunity now to get out there and vote.